Good evening, you're watching Estuary News. I'm Hugh Riches. Coming up tonight, we'll have a roundup of the latest news headlines and all the latest sporting news ahead of the weekend. And I'll be reviewing the week's regional papers with my guest, the Revd Canon Angie Dodd. Lincolnshire firefighters are warning people to be vigilant after a spate of fires in 3 days. Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Service, the fire brigade, has attended 6 kitchen fires caused by cooking being left unattended. One incident involved a saucepan left on the heat for too long when its contents ignited. Crews used a leather blanket to extinguish what they called a blaze. More than half of accidental house fires start in the kitchen. Work is set to start on the Lincolnshire Lakes development near Scunthorpe. It comes after a government loan was awarded to the developers. The £1.3 billion project is expected to create thousands of jobs and create 6 new villages. It'll be built to the west of the M181 in North Lincolnshire. Work should start in January and the development is expected to be complete by 2028. Police have arrested a man in connection with a domestic assault in Hull. Officers were called to a property on Bransholme at 5:20 yesterday afternoon, following reports of a man with a bladed weapon making threats to kill. Police tried to negotiate with the man and then forced entry into the house and arrested the 32-year-old. A young child was safely recovered and is now in the care of family. The man remains in custody and is being questioned by police. A project in Lincolnshire to tackle domestic abuse has been awarded funding. The £1.4 million project aims to support communities, friends and families and identify perpetrators so that agencies can intervene at an early stage. The funding will also pay for specialist one-to-one services to help change abusive behaviour. It'll be funded by the Home Office Police and Transformation Fund over the next 3 years in partnership with Women's Aid and Respect. A Hull company working with the social housing sector has received a funding boost. Westlinks Joiners and Locksmiths Limited has secured £100,000 from the Northern Powerhouse Investment Fund. The company provides construction services to housing associations and charities. The funding has allowed the company to secure 5 new jobs. New and larger contracts will also be set up. Beverley is gearing up for its annual Christmas festival. The centre will be transformed for Christmas shoppers with over 120 stalls selling Christmas gifts and locally produced food and drink. There'll be 4 traditional Victorian Christmas markets. Over 60,000 visitors attended last year's event. The festival takes place from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on the 10th of December. Father Christmas will start the event with his sleigh and reindeer for the Christmas parade. Now it's time to have a look through the week's regional papers with my guest this week, the Revd Canon Angie Dodd, Rector
of Great Grimsby.
Rector of Great Grimsby, and St James's Minster in Great Grimsby is your mother church, isn't it?
It is, indeed.
Angie, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you. Hugh.
What's going on at the Minster? There's a bit of a busy time of year coming up.
It is. We've got Remembrance Sunday coming up in a week on Sunday. Lots of civic occasions going to be around that, and we're going to be engaging lots of people in the town, and it's going to be a busy time for us. And of course, Christmas is not too far away either.
Well, I think we have to, rather than acknowledging that Christmas is coming up, since it's still early November, we'll have to acknowledge the fact that the premature preparations for Christmas are on the horizon and coming up.
Indeed.
So that we don't, because if you turn Christmas into a quarter of the year, 3 months, it just stops being fun, doesn't it?
Indeed, yes. And of course, most of it actually stops locally, doesn't it, for on the 24th of December, it seems to me.
Yes,
So,
I know.
yeah.
And the 12th day of Christmas is the 6th of January.
I know, indeed.
Well, I'm going to be very pedantic this evening because I'm just in that kind of mood. First of all, national story that's rocked politics, but you found the local angle with Grimsby's Member of Parliament, Melanie On.
Indeed. Melanie has said that going round Parliament, there are people that she deliberately avoids because of some of the allegations that have been made, some of the rumours and gossips are going around about the culture of what Westminster is like.
This is the sexual harassment story, the Pestminster, the place has been called. It's not clearly not just in Westminster, not just in politics. This is a sort of a general problem which I'm a bit surprised to find still exists.
Well, I think there's something about a cultural think, isn't there, actually? Organisations don't have any sort of way of internally critiquing their own behaviour, and what the rest of the world would think has been completely unacceptable, perhaps in groups like this, it just is bound to be somehow what people do.
But we're English. We know how to be polite. We're respectful towards each other. And this is sometimes is verging on criminal behaviour.
It is indeed.
It's pretty vile.
And I think it is a real wake-up call, isn't it, to the institutions. And also, I think, a challenge for leadership as well. So we'll see how the Prime Minister responds to this dossier of 36 MPs who are meant to have track records is suggested.
Well, again, as you use the words innuendo and rumour in this, so there's innocent until proved guilty, and of course there's an awful lot in politics. There's an awful lot of ammunition that can be used in a rather unfair way. So anyway, that's very interesting to see how that story turns out. You've got another slightly controversial one, which touches more closely onto your practice, your world, isn't it?
Yes, it's a really sad story here, actually, because it's about a couple from Immingham whose child died a few years ago.
Is this the Grimsby Telegraph as well?
It is. This is from the Grimsby Telegraph. They're an Immingham couple, and they've laid their daughter to rest in the local cemetery and have wanted to build a memorial around that. But of course, it doesn't conform to the churchyard regulations for that particular cemetery, and they've been asked to remove it. And of course, there's this a tension, I think, between what the family wants, what the family needs in order to go and grieve, and actually what's the rest of the people who use that cemetery, that public space, might find helpful or acceptable as well. And there's a conflict there that's arisen. And
you have to be rather tactful, I suppose, as the sort of person in charge of the churchyard, especially. This is a
public cemetery, yeah.
But a churchyard, if somebody says that those English country churchyards that we all know and love so well, with those beautiful stones with the engraving wearing off them, if somebody says they want to come and build a small model of the Taj Mahal for Granny, then you're pyramids popping up in the middle of Lincolnshire. You've just got to put your foot down.
It is very difficult, and there are regulations that we have for churchyards as well to make sure that there are rules about what can be built and what can't be built. But again, we have to go and treat things on a very pastoral level, because people they don't do these things on a whim. They generally do it because for them it's a helpful way to grieve in what is a very sensitive and raw time for a lot of people. So I hope that we do enforce regulations with a good pastoral practice.
With a little gentleness, I suppose.
Yeah.
Talking of building vast, great, big, ambitious constructions.
Oh, I love this one, actually. In my former life, before I was ordained, I was a civil engineer. I used to build roads in Surrey, and...
well, I'm sure they needed them.
They did. It was one of the most heavily trafficked counties in the country, actually. And this is a story about the bridge builders of the Humber Bridge 30 years ago have had a reunion. And it reminded me, the reason I like this story is because when you're working on a large construction project, and I remember one that we did in Surrey, a large road section between the M31 and the A30, there was a real camaraderie between the people there, sort of from the highest engineers to the people who were sort of making the tea in the canteen. It was like there was a real great community spirit, and it just reminded me about these people 30 years on getting back together and remembering some of the fantastic things they were doing, and have built an icon, Hugh.
Now, we're going to come on to that word in a moment. I'm going to resist the temptation to ask you if you ever built a road to Damascus. But the other element of that story, the reason that they were coming together is because the bridge has received, I think it's Grade 1 listed status.
Indeed,
now, that's something that you would associate with a beautiful old medieval church.
Like Grimsby Minster.
Like Grimsby Minster, indeed. But for a 1970s building, I think it's justified there, because that is just apart from being a very practical piece of engineering, it's a beautiful object, isn't it?
It is a very beautiful object. And actually, in terms of engineering these days, a bit of anorak here of an engineer, you don't see very many bridges like this, of this construction, because there'll be the Queensferry Road Bridge in Edinburgh, for example, is now a completely different design.
But it's still a suspension bridge.
It's still a suspension, but a different type of suspension. They're cable stay bridges. This is the older type of suspension bridge, which will be very seldom built these days.
I'm so glad you're here, I really am. You mentioned that word iconic.
Yes.
There's a story here which baffles me in the Grimsby Telegraph. No Grimsby stop for the iconic Coca-Cola truck. This is, again, Christmas coming too early here. The story is, in the Grimsby Telegraph, that the Coca-Cola truck is not coming to Grimsby. So it's a little bit of a negative story. The headline, no Grimsby stop for iconic Coca-Cola truck. Drinks giant Coca-Cola has announced their mammoth 42-date Christmas truck tour. It's mammoth 40. Drinks giant Coca-Cola is singular. So I suspect this is the press release writer rather than anybody else. But no Grimsby stop for iconic Coca-Cola. Is it iconic? What does iconic mean, man of God?
Well, an icon, of course, is something that helps you to see beyond yourself into another world. You know, we use icons as focuses for devotion. I probably wouldn't have a particularly devotional relationship, I think, with the Coca-Cola lorry, but it's a famous one. How about that? Would that be a better word?
My Russian Orthodox friends would say an icon is a representation of something that actually exists within it, that it has both of those presences, as it were. And you can't be very iconic or less iconic. And
you can't qualify unique either.
No, I know. Well, we both have our own little irritations, don't we, that we go there. But there we are. That's something for the sub-editors to think about and that we can talk about in terms of writing newspapers. I'm going to come on in a moment to Bonfire Night, which is coming up on the 5th of November. It's quite a memorable date. And try to get the Church of England Protestant clergyman's attitude to the idea of burning Roman Catholics 412 years later. Seems a little bit unforgiving, but I'm not going to give you a chance to answer that question yet because I'm afraid we're going to have to go to the break. Join me then. We'll have the sports and more newspapers then. Welcome back. You're watching Estuary News. Still to come tonight, all the latest sports news with Jack Muscat. And still with me in the studio, Andrew Dodd, the Reverend Canon Andrew Dodd, rector of St James's Minster in Grimsby, going through the papers. Andrew, just talking about Bonfire Night, I'm catching this story. This is a trade in the Bridlington Press. Just mentioned that Bridlington Rugby Union Club will be hosting an annual event at Duke's Park on Sunday, and that there'll also be charity Bonfire Night and street food festival to raise funds for the RNLI lifeboats, and that's at Sowerby Hall. Now, the big point is, 412 years after the Gunpowder Plot, we still seem to be burning Catholics in effigy. Forgive and forget, eh, Andrew?
Have you seen many guys being burnt these days? I just think it's an excuse for people to enjoy a winter festival and a bit of light. So I personally love going to the big organised firework displays.
Well, I love the fireworks, but I'm just I'm easily dazzled by these things. But it still has a great sort of historical significance, doesn't it? And there is a story behind it, which perhaps is a bit resonant today when there's religious terrorism or religiously inspired terrorism happening. And there's a consistency, isn't there, from 1605 to this rather dreadful year that we've had here.
And I think it reflects intolerance, I think, in lots of people, whether that's secular or religious life, actually, and people who fail to get along with each other because of their differences. In fact, they'd rather define themselves why they're different from others rather than actually saying what they might have to share in common with one another.
I suspect most Bonfire Night celebrations, absolutely anybody is welcome, and the history is entirely irrelevant. Going to be bobbing for apples this year?
I'm not quite sure if I'm going to do that. I would enjoy toffee apples myself.
Toffee apples.
Yeah, toffee apples.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about other autumn celebrations, or winter celebrations, I suppose early winter celebrations. This is a newer one, the Halloween.
Well, new and ancient at the same time. Halloween, the Eve of All Hallows at Grimsby Minster. We're actually celebrating All Hallows, All Saints this coming Sunday.
So a Hallow is a saint, isn't it?
All Hallows is all the saints, so the holy ones. And the day afterwards, traditionally, which is the 1st of November, is All Saints, and then All Souls is the following day as well. We remember all those who have died. So it's not a million miles away from remembering those.
It's got the religious background as well. There's definitely a hierarchy there, isn't there? You know, there's saints first, and then all other ranks after that.
Yes. Those who have gone before us and inspired us, but also those who we have known personally who have inspired us.
What do you think of the way it's celebrated on the streets nowadays?
It's on one level, of course, it's just a bit of fun, isn't it? And it's quite nice for people to dress up. On the other hand, I do kind of wonder why this is suddenly taking off in the way that it is. You see houses covered in sort of spider webs and scene of crime tapes, and I'm a little bit suspicious about what's going on there for some people. But this particular story from the Scunthorpe Telegraph, I noticed there's actually a lot of charity raising, money for charity that they're doing, and so part of me thinks that can't be a bad thing, can
Well,
it?
I guess if the ends justify that, if they're not particularly harmful means, I guess that's it. But it is a sort of invasion by the Americans, a bit like the Coca-Cola lorry that's not coming to Grimsby.
Indeed.
But there you go.
The trick-or-treating, I think, is what bugs people most, isn't it? It's this idea about sort of demanding money with menaces almost, isn't it? On the door.
Instructing your children to do organised begging. Yeah. But let's move on to Christmas, because that's the next one, I suppose.
This is a serious question article here, again from the Skegness Standard here. This is about the food bank in Skegness. Traditionally, food banks, we've got one here in Grimsby, sadly, because there's a huge need for it. And harvest time, which we've just had, is a good time for church services and school services to collect a lot of the food for those things. They're running out already because there's been a 75% increase in demand from people who are having to go to food banks in order to supplement low incomes and to support their families in times of need. 75% increase.
Is that specifically in Skegness, or is
it says here that it's in Skegness, but anecdotally I've heard that it's increasing all over the country. Universal credit is one of the things cited in this article, and again, people having now a large chunk of time between receiving benefits, between claiming benefits and receiving benefits, that's causing real hardship for actually ordinary folk. Actually, not people who are particularly, out of the ordinary.
And I suppose it's that 6-week delay that's a sort of cash flow crisis. But claim now before Christmas, I suppose.
Indeed, and support your food banks. So if you are going out in the supermarket, make sure you buy a bit extra and take it to the food bank as a donation. It's really important.
There's a story here, another Grimsby story, involves an old friend of mine, actually, and an artist who is, well, you tell the story, because it's quite remarkable.
I love this story. You know him, I understand, Hugh, actually.
Sean
Atkinson in Wellhome Road is selling his house. But Sean, as an artist, has decorated his house in an amazing way. He's painted stars and Aurora Borealis, I think, on the ceilings. He's got friends and a community of artists together and painted all sorts of rooms, and he's trying to sell his house. But no one wants to buy it with all this, so unfortunately he's having to whitewash a lot of these pieces of art that he's created in order to sell the house. But he's also selling the house for bitcoins.
Yes, this is the first house sale in the country, apparently, that's been put up for offer to be sold by this kind of cyber currency.
Indeed, apparently. I didn't know very much about this until reading this, but bitcoins are a currency that certain organisations recognise, not traditional banks, I have to say, but this is unique. And I'm not going to qualify the word.
No, I think it's it is so far, anyway, it is absolutely unique. I think Sean would say that's the sort of control of the banks that he dislikes so much, the sort of exploitation that goes on there, and that the Bitcoin economy might be liberating us from those sorts of hierarchical controls.
Far more egalitarian, I think, and again, it would probably fit in, I think, very much with that avant-garde lifestyle, I suspect, that is being.
Well, he's a very creative man, but it's like you say egalitarian, but also in a way libertarian, because there's so much less regulation that the state or other authorities from the top down can put onto it. I recommend the art. I hope somebody puts an offer in before Sean's had to lilac over all that beautiful art.
I might try to go and see him if I can go and get to have a look before that happens.
I'll introduce you, Angie. I'm afraid we're going to have to stop there. Thank you so much for coming in. Excellent, but we're going to have to stop there, because now here is Jack with all the latest sports news.
Hull City face a tough trip to Sheffield United tomorrow afternoon. The Blades currently sit third in the Championship table with almost double the amount of points as the Tigers. Despite this, City manager Leonid Slutsky is confident his side can be competitive at Bramall Lane.
Sheffield good team, but we have average numbers, like statistics numbers, shots, blocks, duels, tackles. It's a very, very similar statistic, and I think will be very, very close match, and I think 90% of a final result will be depends who will score first.
Scunthorpe United kick off their FA Cup campaign tomorrow. The Iron are away to Northampton Town. Manager Graham Alexander admits his team will face a difficult Cobblers side and is taking the game seriously. He believes the FA Cup is still an important competition to be in, and he hopes his team can progress into round 2.
It's another game for us to go and win. It's another different competition. We want to continue our run of form. especially from our league, and you know, Saturday's the next opportunity to do that. We're looking forward to it. I think there's still a buzz about the FA Cup for people who love English football, and you know, I think that goes throughout the whole club. You know, players, staff, supporters. I think it's a big competition, so we want to do well in it, but we can only take one game at a time, and that's Northampton on Saturday.
Grimsby Town's Russell Slade is expecting a tough challenge from League One side Plymouth Argyle tomorrow. The last time the two sides met, the Mariners prevented them from winning the League Two title on the final day of last season. Slade is aware of the threat posed by the Pilgrims, especially from the set pieces of Graham Carey.
Well, resilient for sure, because that's what we've been, resilient and resolute. But and on the road for sure, we've had a threat in that final third. Let's make sure that when we get our opportunities, we do take our chances. This Plymouth team can counter-attack as well, and they're a big threat from set plays because they've got the quality of Carey, who's got a wonderful left foot and can deliver from anywhere.
Hull FC are set to be represented in the second round of fixtures in the Rugby League World Cup in Australia. Tonga captain and Hull FC back rower Sika Manu and former Earlybirds prop Sam Moa will lock horns with former teammate and Samoa captain Frank Pritchard as the two rivals go head-to-head tomorrow. And on Sunday, Black and White second rower Mark Minicello will play against new Hull teammate Beretta Farameo before joining up with the USA international for pre-season. And don't forget, tomorrow Estuary TV will be bringing you live coverage of the rugby union match between Hull Ionians and Cambridge. Coverage of our 3-hour programme begins at 1 p.m. It's presented by two former England rugby players, Terry Garnett and Ian Castledon. This will be the first in a series of live matches over the coming months. It will also be streamed via the internet. Find the link on our website. And that's all for the sport.
Thanks very much, Jack. That's it for tonight, I'm afraid. If you have a story for us, we'd love it if you got in touch via Facebook or Twitter, or you could telephone us on the usual number, 01472315553. Have absolutely splendid weekends until Monday. Good evening.